likes what he sees.
So we're going to have an exciting, dynamic team that's fun to watch. We're going to get better, and we're convicted to build a really good, competitive, knock on wood, championship caliber team. And I think we got some great young talent and some great veterans.
That is Steve Simon, the son of the legendary 91-year-old Indiana Pacers and Indiana Fever owner Herb Simon. He is standing there, looking right into the camera, talking about building a championship caliber team. He is speaking like a man who firmly owns the future. He is speaking like the unquestioned heir to a multi-billion-dollar sports empire. But what if I told you that the glorious future he is talking about might not even belong to him? What if I told you that while everyone on the planet is watching Caitlin Clark shoot logo threes and completely shatter WNBA viewership records, a shadowy, 75-year-old billionaire has quietly slipped through the back door and laid a massive, inescapable $525 million trap? Welcome to the darkest, most intense, and most secretive ownership battle in modern professional sports history. This is not just a story about basketball. This is a story about ultimate power. This is a story about financial leverage, extreme patience, and a brutal corporate chess game played at the absolute highest level of society. We have two billionaires. We have one iconic sports franchise. We have a 91-year-old patriarch who is rapidly running out of time. And we have a 22-year-old generational superstar named Caitlin Clark, who is caught right in the center of a massive financial takeover that she knows absolutely nothing about. Grab your popcorn and pay close attention, because we are about to uncover the shocking and forgotten details of a corporate maneuver so ruthless and so brilliantly calculated, it will make your blood run cold. This is the untold story of Steven Rales, the silent, Sigma mentality billionaire who just bought the absolute rights to steal the Indiana Fever before the opening tip-off. Let us rewind the clock to a very specific moment in time. The date is December 2023. The entire basketball world is entirely focused on the NBA in-season tournament. Every single sports reporter in the United States of America is watching the Indiana Pacers run the floor against the Miami Heat. The media is distracted. The fans are distracted. The internet is distracted. And in the high-stakes world of billionaire acquisitions, distraction is the ultimate weapon. While the cameras were pointed at the hardwood, Steven Rales was sitting in a boardroom executing a masterstroke. Without any press conferences, without any flashing cameras, and without a single leak to the major sports networks, Steven Rales quietly finalized a deal to buy another 15% of the Indiana Pacers and Fever franchise. He already owned a quiet 5%. This new purchase bumped his total ownership stake up to 20%. The overall valuation of the franchise that day, which was eventually reported by Sportico much later, was a staggering $3.47 billion. Steven Rales handed over more than $525 million in cold, hard capital for this exclusive privilege, $500 million transferred in the shadows. But here is the most terrifying part of this entire transaction. Here is the massive historical blunder that the Simon family might have just committed. Buried deep within the hundreds of pages of that complex legal agreement was a single, devastatingly powerful sentence. It was a line of text that nobody bothered to put on a sports television graphic. The official deal, quote, includes a possible path to control should the Simon family ever choose to sell. Read those words again. Let them sink into your mind. A possible path to control. In the cutthroat world of billionaire corporate takeovers, those words are essentially a loaded gun resting on the table. It means that when Herb Simon finally steps down, or when the inevitable realities of life and time finally catch up with a 91-year-old man, Steven Rales gets the very first look. He holds the ultimate trump card. He does not have to fight off a bidding war from outside investors. He does not have to compete with a random consortium of Hollywood celebrities or tech moguls trying to buy into the league. He is already inside the house. He owns 1/5 of the entire building. And he is just sitting there in the dark, waiting for his moment to strike. Now, you might be wondering, why would a 75-year-old billionaire aggressively position himself to take over a Midwestern basketball franchise? What did he see that nobody else saw? To understand the pure genius of this aggressive Sigma-level business move, you have to look at the collateral damage and the absolute goldmine that is currently sitting inside the Gainbridge Fieldhouse. I am talking, of course, about the Indiana Fever and the arrival of number 22. When Steven Rales signed that contract in December of 2023, the Indiana Fever were valued by financial experts at roughly $90 million. That was a respectable number for a WNBA franchise at the time. But then came the draft. Then came the revenge tours. Then came the bitter, high-tension rivalries against the New York Liberty and the Chicago Sky. Then came the media circus, the sold-out arenas, and the absolute cultural earthquake known as Caitlin Clark. In the single year since Caitlin Clark was drafted, the valuation of the Indiana Fever did not just increase, it violently exploded. Last year, the team was worth $90 million. This year, the team is valued at an astronomical $560 million. That is a 522% increase in exactly 2 seasons. It is currently the fastest-growing women's sports franchise on the entire planet. They are now the 3rd most valuable team in the entire WNBA, sitting only behind the Golden State expansion franchise and the massive New York Liberty market. This 522% spike is not the result of some brilliant marketing campaign designed by the front office. It is not the result of expansion draft money distributed by the league commissioner. And, quite frankly, it is not the result of Herb Simon's long-term strategic vision. It is entirely the result of one single human being. It is number 22 walking onto the floor, coming off a grueling 13-game stretch, fighting through a torn-up groin, launching a massive Nike signature shoe campaign, and stepping up to face absolute killers like Paige Buchers and the Dallas Wings on national television. Caitlin Clark single-handedly built the modern financial foundation of this franchise. She dragged this team from the shadows and thrust them directly into the blinding spotlight of international superstardom. But here is the cruel, brutal irony of professional sports. Caitlin Clark generated hundreds of millions of dollars in generational wealth for this franchise, but she did not get a single vote in deciding who eventually owns it. Good feelings do not win championships. Rivalries do not pay the stadium electric bills. Rosters do. And rosters get built by whoever is sitting in the luxury suite writing the massive luxury tax checks 5 years from now. Right now, Caitlin Clark is generating the wealth, but Steven Rales is positioned to harvest it all. So, who exactly is the man holding the strings? Most Indiana Fever fans have never even heard the name Steven Rales. And make no mistake, that is entirely by design. Rales does not sit courtside wearing flashy designer clothes. He does not give 30-minute exclusive interviews to ESPN. You will not find him arguing with referees or tweeting at opposing players. When the Pacers made their massive, highly publicized run to the Eastern Conference Finals last spring, Steven Rales was nowhere to be found. When the WNBA Media Day photo shoot took place just 2 weeks ago, with flashing cameras and reporters swarming Caitlin Clark, the entire event went on without him. He is 75 years old. He was born in Bethesda, Maryland, not Indianapolis, not Indiana. His only connection to the Hoosier State is that he briefly attended DePauw University in Greencastle for his college education. That is it. That is the entire extent of his deep emotional connection to the state of Indiana. In 1984, he and his brother Mitchell co-founded a massive corporate entity called the Danaher Corporation. Today, Danaher does roughly $24 billion in annual revenue. They deal in medical diagnostics, extreme water quality systems, and massive industrial voting machines. One of their major holdings is a company called Beckman Coulter Life Sciences, which happens to be headquartered right in Indianapolis. That is exactly where the paths of Steven Rales and Herb Simon first crossed. But Rales is not just a standard industrial tycoon. He operates a film production studio on the side called Indian Paintbrush, which has produced 8 critically acclaimed Wes Anderson movies and recently acquired the entire Criterion Collection. Forbes magazine lists his current net worth at a staggering $8.9 billion. He is officially the richest man in Washington, D.C. But you must understand the pattern. You must recognize the historical blueprint of how this man operates. Steven Rales never buys attention. He buys controlling positions in undervalued, deeply distressed institutions, and then he waits. He exercises ruthless, terrifying patience. Equity Group Holdings, Danaher, the Criterion Collection. He is always early, he is always completely quiet, and he is always flawlessly positioned to execute a hostile takeover when the absolute perfect moment presents itself. The Indiana Pacers were severely undervalued at $3.47 billion in 2023. Today, They are worth $4.76 billion. The Indiana Fever were sitting at a measly $90 million in 2024. Today, they are worth $560 million. Rales did not pay the inflated, high market price for these massive gains. He bought the option early, he bought the secret backdoor, and he has been sitting in the dark, patiently waiting for the timer to hit zero. To fully grasp the catastrophic danger that the Simon family might be walking into, we have to look back at one of the greatest ownership blunders in the history of the NBA. We have to look at Detroit in March of 2009. This is a dark, forgotten piece of sports history that serves as a massive, screaming warning siren for Indiana. Bill Davidson was the legendary owner of the Detroit Pistons. He had owned the team since 1974. He was 86 years old. He had 3 NBA championship banners hanging in his rafters and a literal Hall of Fame plaque bolted to his office wall. The franchise looked stable. The legacy looked absolutely untouchable. But then, on a random Friday morning, Bill Davidson suddenly passed away. His widow, Karen, inherited the entire massive sports operation, but Karen did not want to run a professional basketball team. She had absolutely no interest in negotiating salary caps, managing player egos, or dealing with cutthroat sports agents. 2 years later, in June of 2011, she panicked and sold the entire operation to a man named Tom Gores for just $325 million. Let me explain why that number is a massive historical tragedy. Just months before that sale, Forbes had formally valued the Detroit Pistons at over $360 million. Mike Elich's ownership group had actually agreed to pay over $400 million the previous fall before those high-level talks unexpectedly collapsed in November. Crane's Detroit business publication explicitly called the final $325 million sale number, quote, a shocking bargain. Here is the brutal, undeniable truth of sports business. When a long-tenured elderly owner dies or steps down without having an ironclad, uncontested path to control already signed and secured, the family bleeds money. When you do not have a successor properly insulated from corporate vultures, the family never gets the fair market price. They get absolutely desperate, and they end up taking whatever the buyer in the best position is willing to write on a check. Bill Davidson did not have a Steven Rales sitting inside his organization. Herb Simon does. And that is exactly what makes this situation so incredibly volatile and dangerous. Herb Simon turned 91 years old last November. He is officially the longest-tenured owner in the entire National Basketball Association. The Pacers came incredibly cheap when he and his late brother Mel originally bought the struggling team back in 1983. They paid $11 million total. Yes, you heard that correctly. $11 million. Today, 43 years later, the family's ownership stake is worth somewhere north of $3.5 billion. Herb's son, Steve Simon, the man you saw in the reel clip at the very beginning of this video, currently lives out in the San Francisco Bay Area. He holds the official title of the team's alternate governor. The public expectation, the media narrative, and the comforting fairy tale that the fan base has been fed for years is that Steve Simon will eventually pack his bags, move back to Indiana, and take over the family business. The Simon family has explicitly said exactly that on the public record multiple times. But public relations statements do not hold up in corporate court. The legally binding Sportico clause does not say if Herb retires, Steve takes over. The contract does not say Steve is the unquestioned king. The contract explicitly says, quote, if the Simon family ever chooses to sell. Two entirely different, violently clashing futures sit silently inside that single sentence. Only one of those futures ends with Steve Simon actually running this basketball team. And that is exactly what fundamentally changes the context of the last 6 months of Fever and Pacers basketball. Think about every single massive salary cap decision Herb Simon's front office aggressively made this past offseason. They handed Aaliyah Boston $6.3 million over 4 years, marking the largest total contract in the history of the WNBA. They handed Kelsey Mitchell $1.4 million, creating the very first WNBA Supermax contract under the brand new collective bargaining agreement. Sophie Cunningham was forcefully brought back. Lexi Hull was aggressively re-signed. Monique Billings was poached directly from Golden State on a lucrative 2-year deal. Stephanie White was ruthlessly pulled off the Connecticut Sun bench in November of 2024 to become the head coach. None of those massive, high-stakes financial decisions happened in a vacuum. Every single one of those checks was signed off while a 75-year-old billionaire was watching closely from a 20% equity stake. Because that is exactly where this story completely stops being about Herb Simon's grand family plan, and it aggressively starts being about Steven Rales' ultimate leverage. The man who might eventually inherit this entire empire was not asked for his permission. He did not need to be. He was just sitting there, calculating the return on his investment. So, Saturday afternoon, when Caitlin Clark intensely walks out of the tunnel at Gainbridge Fieldhouse to face the Dallas Wings, I want you to keep this dark, uncomfortable reality locked inside your head. The man whose ultimate championship window entirely depends on Indiana's next decade is not actually the man making the decisions for Indiana's next decade. He is quietly deferring to a 91-year-old patriarch who took the job back when the Cold War was still happening in 1983. And through a terrifyingly quiet clause written into a 2023 sale agreement, he is deferring to a 75-year-old corporate titan who has been flawlessly positioned to execute a hostile takeover ever since. 2 billionaires, 1 massive sports franchise, 1 opening tip-off, and Caitlin Clark walking out onto the hardwood to play her first highly anticipated regular season minute of 2026 for a team whose dark, twisting ownership math nobody ever bothered to explain to her. Herb Simon has stated on the public record that he desperately wants to win 1 final championship before he eventually passes on. Steven Rales currently has the ultimate path to control clause, sitting silently in a locked drawer somewhere in a mansion outside of Washington, D.C. Steve Simon has a fancy alternate governor title and a first-class flight to catch back to San Francisco. And Caitlin Clark? She has a brutally short 5-year championship window, a rehabilitated torn groin, a massive Nike signature shoe campaign dropping next year, and the heavy burden of carrying the 3rd most valuable women's sports franchise on the planet squarely on her shoulders. Her entire career, her legacy, and the fate of the Indiana Fever are currently hanging by a thread, waiting to see whichever billionaire is sitting in the better, more powerful chair when Herb Simon finally puts down the pen. The Indiana Fever will play their explosive home opener on Saturday. The fans will be screaming, the lights will be blinding, but the billionaires who truly control the game, they are not even watching the same sport.